Hello, my darling, and welcome to today's story time. If you'd like to hear more family-friendly stories like these and other fairy tales, head over to my other channel, Mother Goose ASMR. And now, on with our story time. Homes in Iceland. Men had been feasting in Ingolf's house, but there was no laughing and no shouting of jokes. Ingolf sat in his high seat, frowning and gloomy. His head hung on his breast. He was staring into the fire. Now he raised his head and looked about the hall. "Comrades," he said, "what shall we do? Herstein and Holmstein died by our swords. Our kinsmen hungered to kill us. Besides, when Harold hears of our deed, there will not be a safe place in Norway for us. He will never let a man fight on an honest quarrel. Where shall we go?" A man stood up from the bench. "We have friends in the Shetlands," he said. "Let us find homes there." Then Leif, in the high seat opposite Ingolf, stood up. "No, not the Shetlands, my foster brother. They are crowded already. Besides, Harold will not long keep his hands off them. Then they will be no better than Norway. England and Ireland and Scotland are old. My eyes ache for something new. What of that far island that Floki found? It is empty. We could choose our land from the whole country. There is good fishing. There are green valleys. And Butter Thorolf says that butter drops from every weed. There are mountains and deserts where we may find adventure. I say, let us steer for Iceland." When he stopped, many of the men shouted, "Yes, Iceland." But an old man stood up. "We've all laughed at the tale of Butter Thorolf," he said. "But Floki himself said that the sea without the island is full of ice that pushes up the land, that no ship can live in that water in the winter, that great mountains of ice cover the island. Did not all his cattle die there of hunger and cold? And did he not come back to Norway, cursing Ireland?" "Oh, Sigvat, you are old and fearful," called out Leif, and he laughed. Then he stretched himself up and threw back his head. "Are we afraid of ice? Have we not seen angry water before? I have been hungry, but I have never died of it. Surely if there are fish in the sea and grass in the valleys, we can live there. I should like to stand on a hill and look around on a wide land and think, this is all ours. And out upon a rough sea and think, far off, there are our foes, and they dare not come over to us. Besides, we shall have no Shockhead Harold to lord it over us. We can come and go and feast and fight as we please. We shall be our own kings, and our ships will be always waiting to take us away when we are weary of it. And we shall see things that other men have never seen. I'm tired of the old things. Perhaps in after days men will make songs about those foster brothers, Ingolf and Leif, who made a new country and a wonderful land, and whose sons and grandsons are mighty men in Iceland." Ingolf leaped up from his chair. "By the strong arm of Thor," he cried, "I like the sound of it. Now I make my vow." He raised his drinking horn. "I vow that I will find this Iceland and pass the winter there, and that if man can live upon it, I will go back there and set up my home." "And I vow that I will follow my foster brother," cried Leif. And many men vowed to go. So on the next day, they began to make ready a boat. They looked her over carefully and recalled every seam and fresh painted her, and put into her their strongest oars, and made her a new sail. This will be the longest voyage that she ever made, Ingolf said. When the work was done, they put into her great stores, axes, hammers, fish nets, cooking kettles, kegs of ale, chests of hard bread, chests of smoked meat, brass kettles full of flour, skin bottles of water. They stowed these things away in the ends of the ship. When they were ready, they put in 4 head of cattle. We shall need the milk and perhaps the meat, Ingolf said. Many men wished to go, but Ingolf had said, there is little room to spare and little food and drink. I have planned for half a year, but perhaps we must be willing to sail longer than that. Our food may run short. We must not have extra mouths to feed. There are 30 oars in our boat. I will take only 1 man for every oar, and Leif and I will steer. So they started off. Leif stood in the prow, leaning forward and looking far ahead, and he sang, what does the swimming dragon smell? A storming sea, an empty land. Hunger, darkness, giants, fire. Leif and his sword will laugh at that. They sailed for days and saw no land. Sometimes they passed ships, and always made sure to sail close enough to hail them. Where are you going? Ingolf would call. To Norway, would come back the answer. For trade or fight, Leif would ask. Then would ring out a great laugh from the boat, and this answer, a shut mouth is a good friend. So the 2 ships sailed on, and the men were glad to have heard a greeting and to have been called one. But at last there were the Shetlands. We will go in here and rest, Ingolf said. When they rowed to shore, a certain Shetland man stood there. He watched them land and looked them all over. Then he walked up to Ingolf and said, you look like brave men. Welcome to Shetland. You shall come to my house and rest your legs from ship-going and feel your stomachs. I hunger for news of Norway. So they went to his house and stayed there for 3 days, and good it seemed to be near a fire and in a quiet bed and before a streaming platter. When they went to the shore to start off again, the Shetland man had his thralls carry a keg of ale and a great kettle of cooked meat and put them into the ship. Then the Norsemen put out to sea again and sailed for a long time. Then they saw the island that they had sailed around the night before. There can surely be nothing but a bird's nest atop that, Sigvat said. Look, cried another, pointing. Men were standing on the flat top of that island. They were letting a boat down the steep side with ropes. When it struck the water, they made a rope fast to the rock and slid it into the ship and sailed off. Some robber Vikings from Scotland or Ireland, laughed Leif. It is a good hiding place for treasure. Soon Ingolf and his men got into their ship and were off. Old Sigvat grumbled. Is this land not new enough and empty enough and far enough? I am tired of sea, sea, sea and nothing else. We started for Iceland, said Ingolf. And I will not stop before I come there. I have a vow. Do you make none, Sigvat? And they were on the water again for weeks, and no sight of land. Only the desolate sea stretched around them. Sometimes it was smooth and shining under the sun. Often it was torn by winds, and a gray sky hung over it, and the men were drenched with rain. Once they ran into a fog. For 3 days and nights they could not see sun or stars to steer by. They forgot which way was north. When after 3 days the fog lifted, they found that they had been going in the wrong direction, and they had to turn around and sail all that weary way all over again. But at last, one afternoon, they saw a white cloud resting on the water far off. As they sailed toward it, it grew into long stretches of black, hilly shore, with a blue mountain rising from it. The sun was going down behind that mountain, and long lines of pink and of shining green and great purple shadows streaked with blue. "It is Iceland," shouted the men. "It is like Asgard the Shining," Ingolf said. But it was still far off. Men can see a long way there because the air is so clear. So Ingolf and his people sailed for hours and at last came into a harbor. A little green valley sloped up from it. On one side was the bright ice mountain. Back of it were bare, black and red hills. In that valley, Ingolf and his men drew up their boat and camped. At supper that night, one of the men said, "I almost think I never felt a fire before, or had warm food in my mouth." The men laughed. "It is 4 months since we left Norway," Ingolf said. "Few men have ever been on the sea so long." That night, they put up the awning in the boat and slept under it. After that, some men went fishing every day in the rowboat they had, and Ingolf took others, and they sailed along the shore, seeing what kind of land this was. But winter had begun to come. Ingolf said, "Remember what Floki said of the ice and the rough sea in winter. Soon we cannot sail any longer. Let us choose a place to stay and build a hut there, and cut hay for our starving cattle." So they did. Their hut was a little mean thing of stones and turf. They kept the cattle and the hay in it. Sometimes they slept there when it was very cold, but most of the time they ate and slept by a great bonfire out of doors where it was clean. Every day, Ingolf and Leif and some of the men walked about the island. At night, they all sat around the campfire and talked of what they had seen during the day. "This is surely a wonderful land," Ingolf said once. "It is at the same time like Niflheim and Asgard. Here is a soft spot in green, a sweet cradle for men. Next, it is a mountain of ice where men would freeze to death. And next to that is a hill of rock that seems to have come out of some great fire. Yesterday I saw a cave on the seashore. The door of it was big enough for a giant. The waves broke at the doorstep. A terrible roaring came from the cave. I think it is the home of a giant. I think that giants of fire and giants of frost made this island. I've seen great basins in the rocks filled with warm water. They looked like giants' bathtubs. I've seen boiling water shoot up out of the ground. I have walked and have felt and heard a great rumbling under me, as though some giant were sleeping there and turning over in his sleep. One day, I stood on a mountain and looked inland. There was a wide desert of sand and black and red rock with nothing growing on it. The fierce wind blew dirt into my eyes, and the cold of it froze the marrow in my bones. When I have seen these things, I have cursed the country and have said, "The gods hate Iceland. I will not stay here." But then I have walked through beautiful warm valleys where the winds did not come. I saw in my mind the flowers that we found last summer. I saw our cattle feeding on the sweet grass. I thought of the sea full of good fish. I saw my house built among green fields, and my wife sitting in her home, and my children playing among the flowers, and making up tales about the bright ice mountains. I saw the wide, rough seas between me and Harold and our foes. Then I thought to myself, it is the sweetest home on earth. As for me, I am coming here to live. I never saw a land that I liked better. With giants, all around. My sword is my god, and my ship is my temple. And I like this land to set up in. They sat about the fire long that night, making plans. You shall go home and get our women and things, Ingolf, said Leif. I will off to Ireland and have a frolic. There will be little lay of swords in this empty land, and I want to have one last game before I hang up my battle knife. Besides, I will come to you with a ship full of gold and clothes and house hangings such as we cannot get here, and they will cost me nothing but the swing of a sword. As they talked, Ingolf looked up at the sky. The northern lights were quivering there. They were like great flames of yellow and green and red. See, he said, and pointed. We are not so far that the gods will forget us. There is the flash of the armor of the Valkyries. A battle is on somewhere, and Odin has sent his maidens to choose the heroes for Valhalla. And this, my darling, ends our story time for today. As always, I hope that you have very sweet and creepy dreams.